Hello and welcome to Geek Speak for another week. We're your hosts. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jonathan.
Now, we'll jump straight into the news this week with the first big bit of news is that we have an official casting choice made on the upcoming Captain Marvel movie, with Brie Larson having been cast as the titular captain and her alter ego Carol Danvers. Now, despite the fact that her solo movie is not due out for quite some time yet, there's a lot of thought that maybe she was cast this early simply because of her going to be playing a major or minor or just any sort of role in the upcoming Infinity Wars movies. Which, personally, I'm excited to see. Well, this will be the third female hero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Or, I guess fourth if you count Gamora. So, I mean, it's always good to have more powerful women in cinema.
In my opinion, there's not enough. You see, there's not enough that convey that strong, Chris Hemsworth. In the male genre, you've got your Chris Hemsworths, and the list is very long. They're very well known, but I haven't yet to see a household woman's name out there. So
yeah, I mean, at the moment, the closest would be Scarlett Johansson for her role as Black Widow, and possibly, you might say, I can't remember her first name now, I think it's Emma Olsen? Oh no, Elizabeth Olsen, who played Scarlet Witch. And that's obviously in the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, so they're the only two that have interacted, and then you've got the third being Gamora from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And hopefully with Infinity War being a method of linking the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Avengers and their cadre of heroes, it should be quite an interesting dynamic having this character, especially with her background.
I'd like to see more Scarlett Johanssons.
Yeah, people have been crying out for a few years now to have a Black Widow standalone movie.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the TV universes as well, and look at the last of the 2 seasons of Agent Carter, they've easily laid the groundwork for them to make a Black Widow movie that's based on her background and how she was trained from being the ballerina that she started as to the world's deadliest assassin that she is now.
If they did that, I reckon it would take off. There's definitely not enough strong women in this genre. I mean, you got Ryan Reynolds as well with the new Deadpool movie.
Yeah.
So there needs to be some compensation in that area, I think. I think the fans will love it.
Yeah, definitely. And for those of you who don't recognise the name Brie Larson, you'd probably mostly recognise her from, for me myself, I've only really seen her in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, where she played Envy Adams, the lead singer of The Clash at Demon Head.
Yeah.
And more recently, she was also in the movie The Room, where she did a very, very impressive Oscar-winning role as the character of Ma.
Not seen that.
Okay.
So, in other news, we've got the CEO of Ubisoft, who's purchased a movie production, So his initial plans are to take the gaming IP and transfer that over to the movies.
Yeah, so basically, for those who don't know Ubisoft, it is a gaming publisher, one of the bigger ones out there. They have a number of popular single and multiplayer games, and he's basically wanting to follow Blizzard and Activision's steps in making the in-house adaptations.
So it'll be interesting in what types of games he goes for, because there's a variation on the games that Ubisoft make.
Yeah, unlike...
They've got adventure, action...
Yeah, I mean, you look at a company like Blizzard and it's basically got StarCraft, Warcraft, and most of their other properties are based on that or Diablo. But then you look at Ubisoft and they've got everything from children's platformers to shooters.
So it'll be interesting what he chooses, if he's going to do Rayman or Prince of Persia or any of the Tom Clancy series, which is quite popular.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Tom Clancy stuff, like the Splinter Cell universe, that would really lend itself well to a movie, because it is seen from a single perspective. It is following a fairly interesting storyline. And then
I think the main problem with that, though, is you've got a lot of shooters up there in the movie production business. There is a lot of action and shooters, so it's got to define itself.
Yeah, I mean, look at failed attempts at shooter-based video game movies like the Hitman movies. There hasn't been a decent one of them.
Yeah, so it's got to really come into an element of its own, and it would be quite a task to live up to the games, I think.
Yeah, although with these Tom Clancy games, I think he's got a lot better chance of making a good story based on them than, say, Activision has with taking their Call of Duty games, because honestly, story was never a strong suit of Call of Duty, whereas the Tom Clancy games have always been very story driven.
And Far Cry as well. I mean, there was a Far Cry movie, which, in my opinion, wasn't very good. But maybe there's a revival there. Maybe it can come back. Maybe it can do something well.
Yeah, maybe the people who actually make the games will make a better version of the movies, because they have that history with it and that lore with it. Whereas giving it to a new writer and a new director is like going, well, here's this thing that people have got hundreds of hours, like each individual has hundreds of hours worth of game time already put into it and invested in it. And now here you come, who's never played the game in their life, trying to write a story that they'll find interesting.
The main part of this story that excites me, though, is you look at the comic book and what they've done with the comic books and the movies they've made, and they've just been fantastic. It's been a whole other genre.
Yeah.
And it's opened everyone up to the comic books as well. Like, now people know who Deadpool is. Things like that could happen for games.
People who've never read comics are picking up comics because they see the Avengers or Spider-Man or Iron Man on the big screen, and they're like, oh, this is a comic as well?
Let's go read it. I hope that happens.
If that happens with these video game movies, that they make a really quality movie, like possibly the Assassin's Creed movie due out later this year, if it's really quality, that will, like, one of the first blowbacks of that success will be people buying more copies of the Assassin's Creed games. And
exactly. It also changes the social perspective as well, because everyone who, well, not everyone, but most people who have read a comic before, it used to be very uncommon. It was very niche. It was like, you're a nerd, you're a geek. Now everyone's more open to it. They've completely changed the way it's viewed in society. So maybe that'll happen for the gaming community as well.
Yeah, possibly. Now, in a bit of other news, another type of adaptation, we've got our first look at the upcoming small screen adaptation of Neil Gaiman's book series, American Gods. Now, this series is set to premiere on the American cable network Starz. They've just released their first trailer online to coincide with San Diego Comic-Con this weekend. But basically, from what we've learned so far, the series will follow a character named Shadow Moon, who is an ex-con who's just gotten out of jail and finds himself caught up in a war between the old gods of America and the new gods, such as technology and entertainment and such, and they're really the living personifications of that. And he gets hired as the bodyguard of a man named Mr. Wednesday, who I'm not sure if he is one of the gods or if he's just a powerful magician, because I haven't actually read all of the American Gods books. I've only read, I think, the second or third book in the series, Anansi Boys, which dealt with more of the Anansi gods than this one does. But being a Neil Gaiman series, it's incredibly deep and has a lot of backstory and mythology that you wouldn't get on first glance, which is part of why I'm glad this is going to TV, because it's not something you could really do in a 90 to 180 minute film.
And you see that with many of the adaptations from books that have been on the big screen, is that there's just not enough content there for you to fully understand.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Lord of the Rings as one of the first examples, and even though like the extended cuts of those movies end up being like 4 or 5 hours each for those 3 movies, that's still cutting out a good 40 to 50% of what was in the books, simply because the way they wrote it to fit it into the movie cut out whole characters and their interactions, and the origins of certain things were changed, and the ways people got to certain places were changed. And it was the same sort of thing for Harry Potter.
Books have definitely had that problem going to the big screen. I think now directors are aiming at TV series a fair bit. Just to try and limit that a bit more, give them a bit more time to explain everything.
Well, you look at the trend that they had in Hollywood. It went from... There was a bit of a trend towards making book adaptations, when you got the Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potters and the Hobbit, and they were the good adaptations. Then you got the really not good adaptations of stuff like the Vampire Academy, the Twilight series, the 50 Shades of Grey movie.
Vampire Academy is definitely up there for that. I mean, that is just not... It took a massively popular book and it cut out 3/4 of it. Yeah. When I watched that film, I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, to fit it into that, to fit this book that has dozens of hours worth of reading in it, into a 90 to 180 minute movie, which is like 1.5 to 3 hours, you're going to have to basically gut everything except the main action points, which leaves a lot of people wondering what's going on and what just happened.
That was probably the worst movie to book adaptation, book to movie adaptation I've seen.
The worst starting from a decent book, at least.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
We're not going to even start on how bad the 50 Shades book is.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but hopefully, like, now that movies have started to move on towards reboots, decent reboots, or kickstarting previously dead franchises with new entries, hopefully now we'll get more book adaptations on TV where they can actually take the time to tell the story in depth, like they did with Shadowhunters.
Yeah, Shadowhunters, they've done that well. They've still reduced the content a little bit, but they did it better than the movie.
Yeah, well,
it was so much better than the movie.
The series was a 12-episode series of
and it's only,
about 44 minutes an
episode.
Yet,
so,
and
still,
I mean they're leading up to a second series.
Yeah.
But even that first series, which covered roughly the same story as the first movie, they had 12 44-minute episodes as opposed to an hour and a half.
Yeah. You're going to always understand more.
Yeah, it's not hard to see which one will be of higher quality, even if it doesn't have a $138 million budget or something.
Yeah.
And especially it gives you that character relationship.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to build a relationship and an understanding of a character when you're seeing them for 40 minutes a week, as opposed to when you're meeting them and saying goodbye to them within an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who's gone on a single date will know that.
I've always actually preferred TV series over movies.
Yeah.
Might just be a phase.
TV shows...
TV
shows are something that you sit there and you get invested in, whereas movies are something you go to for a short escape.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big issue that
the movies
big
have.
thing that they've got there. That
especially like
movies
this is
are trying
a new
too
industry.
hard.
This is a new industry, so I mean, movies maybe will be less popular in the future.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Even now, because it's getting that much cheaper to do CGI and special effects for TV shows, whereas we'll now have a TV show that has special effects that are equal to a movie from a decade ago, but at a fraction of the cost.
It will help the industry a lot, I think, bringing in these TV series. If they're good, they might actually get the people to read the books. Purely, I know, from my point of view, if the movie's not going to be any good, why would I bother to go back and read any of the books?
Yeah.
So this might encourage people to read a bit more, which would be good.
Yeah.
Because books get forgotten and that saddens me.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. PlayStation has announced that they've got 20.8 million people on PlayStation Plus now. It's a massive number.
Yep, and this is purely those people who have actually subscribed to the Plus membership, which is, like, I'm not sure about the international rates, but for us in Australia it's about $15 a month.
And that's, if you look at this population of Australia, we're 24 million, 25 million. I think we're up around 30 now. So that's probably 70%, 60-something%.
Yeah,
That's
not sure.
That's almost one every two people. It's over 50%, so that's quite a big deal when you put it in that perspective. I don't know what's going to happen in the future though. Xbox One, I know they're bringing out their new project.
Yeah, the Project Scorpio, which is due out early to mid next year.
So the thing is, are people going to actually keep paying good money to be on PlayStation Plus when they're going to have exclusive games to the Xbox Scorpio?
Well, I think this opens up a huge can of worms for both these companies, because Microsoft itself already has its Xbox Live Gold membership, which is basically the same thing as the PlayStation's PlayStation Plus. So they've probably got a decent number of subscribers on there. Possibly not as high as Sony's, because quite frankly Sony is smashing Microsoft in console sales. But
Yeah.
both systems have their exclusive titles. The big thing about the Scorpio that Microsoft is releasing is that it's being released specifically with the ability to render 4K graphics, which is...
It creates a problem for Sony, because Sony has now got a hole in that market. Exclusive games, high-end games, are going to be skewed to Microsoft.
Yeah, I mean, at the
They've
moment...
got to release something as well.
At the moment, Sony has a slight head over Xbox in terms of graphical fidelity and frame rate.
And performance, and that's what Sony's known for. I
Yeah.
mean, Microsoft, you gotta look, they're a PC company.
Yeah.
They're seen across the world as, computers.
Yeah, well, the original Xbox was even built specifically because it was a pure custom-built system purposefully built to run games with DirectX. So
Xbox.
its full name was the DirectX Box, which they then shortened, obviously.
Yeah, and now, PlayStation's always had that whole image. We're purely gaming. We've got the power. We've got the performance. We can do this better.
Yeah, well, originally, everyone has heard of the console wars, and if you haven't, you're
under a rock.
well, you're
At
either
this
under
point.
a rock or you're too young.
Yeah, that's it.
What we're in now is the second console war. The first one was between Nintendo and Sega in the 90s. Sega eventually bowed out because of their failures with the Sega Saturn and the Dreamcast. Right around the time that Sony came into it with the PlayStation. And because of that, Sony was the first company to have a massively successful disc-based game system. And admittedly, the discs at that point weren't great, but...
They've just changed the game.
Yeah,
They changed the game.
it was a lot better than looking at the Nintendo equivalent at the time, the N64, which...
just had it just had nothing on it.
It was cartridge.
Cartridge, yeah.
It had some,
It
truly
was
breakout
awesome,
games.
like Mario. How sick was that? You can't get away from it. But yeah, performance-wise...
Ever since then, the PlayStation has had that hand up over Nintendo, where Nintendo's gone more family-friendly and less about the high definition. Sony's always been at the forefront of new technologies. Even when Xbox jumped in, Sony just had that one leg up on them.
And they always have, up until this point. I'm a bit afraid, honestly.
I have to say, the one thing that Sony has going for it over Xbox and Microsoft in the future is the PlayStation VR.
Oh, yeah.
Because Microsoft, it doesn't have any specific VR tech attached to it. You will be able to use the Oculus or the Vive, but the big thing there is that it's not specialised for it.
And it's a massive risk. These new things, I mean, they're a bit touchy-feely when you're first coming into the market. You don't know if anyone's going to pick it up. I mean, it could just come out and it could just be complete and utter just nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, to use the Oculus Rift or the HTC Vive, you need first off, you probably need to spend about 3 months on a waiting list to get your hands on one. But then you need a computer that is specially built to run VR games. And at the moment there just aren't any VR games there aren't any full immersive VR games. They're all VR experiences, like riding a roller coaster or an on-rails shooter with a light gun or something. Whereas the PlayStation VR, it will run on your standard PlayStation 4 console that you bought 3 years ago. It might cause it to gain a bit of heat from running everything at its maximum, but it will still run. And they're releasing an upgraded version of the PS4, the Neo or the Slim Neo, whichever you want to call it, which will be reinforced to run VR without any of those heat generation problems.
I'd hate to see Sony lose its image though. I mean, you got to think, Nintendo's lost its image in this market. I mean, it is, back in the day when it had 64, it was the best thing going until Sony come out and just destroyed it. And now it's the Wii, like, you're never going to get any performance out of that.
You look at what Nintendo did after that, and they did the GameCube, the Wii, which admittedly introduced motion gaming, which the other companies tried and failed at, and the Wii U, which went even weirder with the massive, almost tablet of a main game controller.
But you got to give them credit where credit's due. They've got the best arcade style games. I mean, there's no secondary on that.
The problem
is it just doesn't appeal to what we're talking about. Is appealing to those hardcore. I want to shoot things, gamers, stuff like that. One
of the biggest problems that the Wii and the Wii U have had is that apart from like a handful of in-house Nintendo-made games, everything else on the console has been either a bad port of a game from another system or shovelware, which is basically someone's either gotten a license for something and rushed through a game just so they can paste the name on it, or they've just made a really dodgy game that you can finish in 3 hours or something. And
it's
the only people who buy that sort of crap are Call of Duty gamers. Although, admittedly, Call of Duty does have a very robust multiplayer, whereas most of these shovelware games have none whatsoever.
Yeah, I would really hate to see Sony lose this, like, not keep up with Microsoft here. If there's going to be exclusive 4K graphics games, they're not going to have the capacity to run it. And people, if you got a good game, people are going to buy the console that they want to play the game on.
I think the big risk that both these companies are taking is that PlayStation is sinking things into VR, and admittedly their VR headset's going to come out at about $300 to $400 Australian, I think was roughly the price point they announced. And then they'll be releasing games specifically for the PlayStation 4 for VR that you could also play not VR, and it'll also have a function where you can basically play any of your previous games in VR. It'd just be as if you're sitting in a cinema.
That'd be cool.
Whereas Microsoft is more going for, we can run 4K games. Just because the console is able to doesn't mean developers will go, we're going to program a game with 4K. It could just be we're going to program a game that requires more graphical power or more processing power because we now have that extra leeway. Because, I mean, not everyone has a 4K TV. At the moment, they're still around $2,000 to $3,000 for a 4K TV of a decent size where you can actually get the benefit. And nobody else is making 4K content for it.
And they're definitely VR is not a relatively new concept, but 4K is definitely a relatively new concept, and they're definitely relatively new in the market, so it's still yet to be seen which one is going to prevail.
Yeah,
but they're definitely risky.
And we've already seen that VR is here to stay. We've got the three companies, Sony, Oculus and HTC, making their VR headsets. We've got the Google Cardboard and the HTC headsets that you basically put your phone in and it simulates, it uses the phone's inbuilt gyroscope to simulate the movement. But
it's a very bold move by Sony. It is a very bold move.
I don't know that it's a bold move in going with their own, going with VR. I think the bold move on Sony's part is going with their own VR, not going with a company like Oculus or HTC.
That's the bold part, because they're not partnering with anyone, they're doing it on their own, but then they're falling behind to Xbox as well. So if it plays out for Sony, it's going to be absolutely miraculous. I mean, it'll change everything, but
I'm pegging my money on Sony winning this this
console war
battle in the ongoing console war, simply because the price point to get into the PlayStation VR is so much lower. I mean, it's $300 or $400 for the console, then another $300 or $400 for the for the VR setup, which is the headset and the two light sticks,
that's all right.
old Move controllers.
$800.
Whereas you look at the Microsoft's Scorpio, which is probably going to have the $400 to $500 price range, but then you will have to spend an extra $2,000 or $3,000 on a 4K TV to actually get any use out of it. And even one of the executives of Microsoft at E3 turned around and said, if you don't have a 4K TV, don't bother getting this. Which I'm assuming on the after being berated by his higher-ups at Microsoft the next day in another interview, he turned around and said, look, I'm not saying if you're not going HD or 4K, don't buy it. It's just funny. Another example of someone going to E3 without being properly told what they can and can't say and ending up with their foot in their mouth.
And telling people the truth, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Telling people the truth and they shouldn't have said it.
But really, they're concentrating on 4K and higher resolution graphics because they believe that's what people want, because that's what they're seeing with the computer sales. But the thing is, computer monitors are a lot cheaper to produce than TVs because computer monitors don't have to do anything except the data input and then put it on a screen, whereas TVs today, they not only have the screen, but they have multiple data inputs. A lot of the times they're smart TVs, so they can go online, check your email, check your YouTube, stream movies and videos and whatever.
Yeah, it's a big risk by both of them by shutting that other door, though.
Yeah, it is.
They should be playing both fields.
Like I said, I'm pegging my money on Sony simply because it has the lower price point for access and it's more tuned to not only the people who have that high-end TV and the high-end gaming environment, but simply because of the fact that you can put this headset on and play even like PS2 or 3 games that you bought on the PlayStation Market or the PSN store.
That's sick.
With the view that it's just on a giant cinema screen through the VR headset. That's a lot better than going, I've bought this Microsoft Xbox Scorpio device, I've got a 4K TV, I'm playing one of my backwards compatible Xbox One or original Xbox or Xbox 360 titles like Halo or the original Gears of War series.
Yeah, Gears.
And even though I've got all this updated graphics power and I've got more power than this game could possibly use, this game was built and run on the previous or 2 generations ago.
Yeah.
So no matter how fancy my display equipment is and how fancy the console is, the game wasn't programmed to run like that. Whereas Sony and their VR,
it's groundbreaking.
it's gonna be a case of doesn't matter what the game is. It'll run as if you're playing it in a cinema.
And you can still run it without it. A
Yeah.
lot of them will be.
Most of those games will run without the headset as well.
So they're pulling best of both worlds there.
Yeah.
And 20.8 million, you're gonna get people buying.
Yeah, I mean, even at, like, to put that in perspective, World of Warcraft at its height, at the absolute peak of its popularity, had, I think, 30.6 million subscribers, and at the moment has something like 6 million. So this is
winding down.
more than three times the number of subscribers that World of Warcraft has.
Yeah, it's all those COD players.
COD players, and there's probably a handful of Destiny players.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt that you get a free game every month.
That's cool.
But anyway, that's us done for the
Yeah,
week.
that's us done for the week.
If you've got any comments or questions, you can drop it in the comments below, or you can hit us up on our Facebook page.
Recommendations.
Yep. I have recently just started watching a couple of new anime series. They've just this past week released their second episodes. I'm actually quite excited to watch these series because even though we haven't talked about it much on this show since they were around before we started, I've been watching Danganronpa 3, which has got both the Despair arc and the Future arc. And the Despair arc is a prequel to the original, whereas the Despair arc, or the Future arc, is based a few years after the original Danganronpa finished.
I'll have to check that out.
It's really interesting, and if you played Danganronpa 1 or 2, or if you watched the original Danganronpa anime,
Fantastic.
it's familiar characters, familiar locations, and it's fleshing out the world a lot more. It really tells you a lot more about the world. Despite the one thing that surprised me a lot at the very end of the first episode of the Future arc was the reappearance of possibly the most evil mechanical animal ever.
He's back!
Mono Bear.
Mono Bear!
It's
yes!
it's just it's a brilliant show. I've only seen the first episode of each so far, but it looks incredible, just like the originals.
My recommendation for the week, I'm tossing up between two, but I'll go with the one that I've actually put an episode on this week. I'm quite old school sometimes. I go back to the old ones. FMA, Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah.
I felt like rewatching it.
Is this the original or the Brotherhood redo?
I was going with the original, so both of them are awesome, so check out both of them, but I'll go with the redo because that was the one I was actually watching, so
Yeah.
I'll recommend that one for this week.
Yeah, it's a brilliant series. I haven't seen much of Brotherhood, but I've seen all of the original series, and it was
Astonishing, like.
It's brilliant. Brotherhood goes a lot more into it and really flips your expectations when you least expect it. But it's a brilliant series. The only thing I can say is never call Ed short.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Okay, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. If you've got any recommendations,
Yep.
put them in the comments below.
Anything you'd like us to
Have a look
at to possibly recommend to others, or even if you just want to have a chat with us about something we've talked about, or have a chat with some of our other viewers about a show that you liked, then, like I said, that's what we've got, the comments below and our Facebook page, and all that information will be in the description.
Alright, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.